Okay, so in the first part of the tutorial, we successfully returned a 200 HTTP code using curl on phpacademy.org. We put a load of rubbish in the middle of that, and then we returned a code 0. So now we know that this function works. We're going to get rid of this call here because it's unnecessary, and instead what we want to do is we want to return either true or false. So we want to compare the status code to something, and we're going to be using an inline if statement, if you want to call it that. So we're going to be checking if the status code is equal to 200. So return if status code equals 200, return true, otherwise return false. Okay, so quite straightforward. If the status code is 200, return true, otherwise false. So what we can now do is we can take into account our user input. We need to validate that as well, so we're going to check that it's a valid URL first, because we don't want to be validating any invalid URLs. Then we're going to go ahead and check that the website is actually up, and then return a message specifically to whether it's up or not. So the first thing we want to do when taking into account user input is checking if the variable is set. The variable we're looking for comes from this input field here, and the name of this field is URL. So let's create an if statement here. I'm going to say if is set $_post URL. So we're taking this value here and checking if it's set. Remember, we're using the post method. So if that equals true, that means that that has been posted. We also want to check whether it's if it's not empty. So $_post URL again, and then we say equals false. So if it's set and not empty, we can go ahead and do some more stuff here. So what do we actually want to do? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is create a variable called URL, and that's going to hold the contents of the posted URL, just to make it a lot easier for us to use this URL here. We just need to reference this variable name. Now the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and just use the trim function and just trim this. That will remove white space from the left and the right hand side of the URL, just in case the user accidentally typed another space at the end or at the start of the URL. That just means that it tidies it up a bit and we can validate it properly. So now what we're going to do is we're going to check if the URL is valid or not. So we're going to create another if statement, and we're nesting if statements a bit here, which probably isn't a good idea. It's probably better to have some kind of validation system set up. However, just for the sake of the tutorial, we're going to be nesting a few if statements. So if we're going to be using filter var, and this is just going to check whether the URL is valid. That means, does it have HTTP or another valid protocol on the front of it? We're looking for the domain and an extension, and we want this to equal true. And the parameters we pass here are, first of all, the URL, the string that we want to validate, and then the way that we want to validate it. So filter var is used to validate other things as well, but we want to use filter_validate_URL. Okay, so if it is a valid URL, for now we're just going to go ahead and say valid, otherwise we're going to echo invalid URL. So let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like in the browser. So let's hop over to our browser. Okay, so I'm going to type a load of rubbish in, click submit, and it says invalid URL. Go ahead and type in google.co.uk, and it says valid. So we know that our code works from now. We've tested it. The only difference is now what we want to do is check whether this URL is up, or the website is up or not. So again, we create an if statement and otherwise something else. And the condition in here is going to be, and we're going to now use our function that we created up here, up or down. Specify in here the parameter, the URL. If that equals true, i.e. it's returned a status code of 200, true is passed through to this function, and then we check it here, echo that website is up. Otherwise, we want to say, sorry, that website is down. Okay, So let's go ahead and take a look at now what this looks like. So we're utilizing the function that we created. Obviously you'd have this elsewhere, you'd have it in an include page, but for the sake of the tutorial we've kept it inside of the page there. Okay, so let's go ahead and type in a load of rubbish, submit, invalid URL, google.co.uk, submit, and it says that website is up. Let's go ahead and just modify this, put a few O's in there, click submit, and it says sorry, that website is down. So in literally a very short function, we've created the ability to check if a website is up or down or not.